Okay, so let's talk about the gene key system and how it is different from human design. I actually recently did a video about how I like to use gene keys and human design together and how they kind of complement each other. So if you haven't seen that video, you can go ahead and watch it. I will link it in a card. But today we are going to be specifically talking about what the gene keys system is and how it works on a grander scale, essentially. Hello, if you are new here, my name is Ebony. I am a human design reader, expert, and coach. So, if you've been here for a while, then you have heard me say that human design is a spiritual system that shows you how you are best meant to operate in the world. Gene Keys is very similar to that. It was actually created by a man named Richard Rudd, and he's actually still alive. The creator of human design unfortunately passed away, but Richard is still alive, and he's on the internet, he's on Instagram. So if you are interested in really learning about this system from him, you can absolutely do that because he is actually still up and kicking. So the way that I see Gene Keys as a system is that it is archetypal, right? It is an overview. It's meant to give you a big picture awareness of not only your energy, but also the little trigger points on your journey as you're moving through life, right? It's very much a roadmap to how your energy operates, especially when we're talking about an energetic exchange with another person, right? So what do I mean when I say that Gene Keys is archetypal? When we're looking at, the sequences, we're looking at the spheres, which I'm going to get to in a minute. It's very esoteric, and it's an overview, basically, right? You have words like the changer, right? Or the provocative mind. When we're talking about core wounds, you get things like repression, denial, abandonment, right? These are archetypes that we all as humans experience in our lifetime, right? We all at some level experience some kind of abandonment. We all at some level experience these shadows and these gifts and these cities. So what makes it archetypal is that there are things that we all experience at certain points in our lives. And it's a matter of which archetypes, right? Which energetic frequencies am I experiencing the most, and what triggers me into, these specific experiences, right? And how can I stay more in kind of the gift frequencies, versus staying in the shadow frequencies. So when we say Gene Keys is an archetypal system, that's what it means. It's things that we all experience at some point in our life, and it's a matter of discovering which frequencies we are more attuned to and which frequencies we spend, more time experiencing. So that's number one. Number two, with Gene Keys, that kind of differentiates it from human design is that it is very sequential, right? So the Gene Keys thing, right? The human design has the body graph, right? And the Rave Mandala. Gene Keys has the hologenetic profile. And the hologenetic profile is made up of 3 sequences. The first sequence is called the Genius sequence. The second sequence is called the Venus sequence. And the third sequence is called the Pearl sequence. So the Genius sequence is essentially your incarnation cross in human design. This is the beginning of your journey, right? This is where you're unlocking your 4 prime gifts. This is when you're stepping into your genius, right? You're stepping into your life's work. You're stepping into your purpose. You're anchoring these frequencies into your body so that you are stable in what you are here to do before you move on to the next sequence, which is the Venus sequence. Now, in the Venus sequence, this is when we're opening our heart. This is very, very, very deep work, okay? We are looking at our deepest core wounds. We're looking at the wounds of our mind. We're looking at our emotional wounds and our spiritual wounds. This is when we're healing our inner trauma, we're connecting with our inner child and healing our trauma. So this is very, very deep, very sensitive work that we're doing in the Venus sequence. And the reason why we have to do this is because relationships are such a big part of our experience as being human. And if we're going to, move into the Pearl sequence, we're going to need to be able to have these healthy, stable relationships that we can't do if we're constantly acting out of trauma, constantly acting out these shadow frequencies that make it difficult for us to connect with other people. And the reason why we need to connect with other people moving into the Pearl sequence is because the Pearl sequence is all about service. It's about service and creating prosperity. This is essentially your career, right? This is how you're meant to create wealth, how you are meant to share your gifts that you already anchored yourself into, how you're meant to share that with the world, how you're meant to, create a life for yourself. You can't, I don't want to say you can't, but it's much more difficult to do that if, number one, you don't know what your gifts are, and number two, you don't know how to work with or have relationships with others. So in my head, that's why the Pearl sequence is last, because there's other things that you need to anchor into first before you can really step into being of service and creating that wealth and prosperity, right? Now, the other part of the gene key system that's really important is the fact that it is contemplative. The way that you're meant to move through and work with the gene key system is through contemplation. Now, I made a whole video about this. If you're interested in that, I can link it as well, but I will touch on it a little bit here. To contemplate something is not only to think about it, but it's also to understand how this thing shows up for you and how it has affected you and how it could possibly affect you in the future. Part of the difference between human design and gene keys is that human design is like, you have a defined sacral center, this is how you're meant to operate. You're a 2-4 profile, this is how you're meant to operate. With gene keys, it's like your core wound is repression. What does that look like for you? It doesn't tell you how repression will always show up for you, or how repression will specifically affect you. It tells you this is what repression is. This is the reactive version. This is the repressive version. This is how it, could show up. But then the question that it asks is, how does it show up for you? Right? Because maybe repression for you doesn't have a whole lot to do with your emotions. Maybe it has to do with your ideas. You repress your individuality. You repress your uniqueness out of fear of rejection or out of fear of abandonment, versus someone else, like, they're fine sharing their ideas with other people, but they repress their emotions. They don't want to feel things, right? And they don't want other people to know that they're feeling things. So, we're just going to shove all that down. We're just not even going to, right? They're both repression, but they're manifesting differently. So a big part of the point of the gene key system is to understand, how does this archetype, how does this energetic frequency show up for me? And again, I see this as the big picture. And once we have this overview, once we have this awareness, then we can dig into, using our human design, our strategy, and our authority, what are the actions that I now get to take in accordance with the information that I have learned, right? So that is essentially the gene keys system in a nutshell. I also want to mention that gene keys is actually an offshoot of the human design system. However, it is also a system in and of itself, right? It synthesizes other systems like astrology, like the I Ching, just like human design does. And if you're working with these systems together, you will notice the 64 gates in the human design system are the 64 gates of the gene keys. There may be some differences with how each system interprets the gate, but they are, one and the same. Gate 1 is gene key 1. Gate 64 is gene key 64. So if you're working with these systems, don't get confused by that. They are essentially the same thing. So I hope that this was helpful. Also, I am running a free 3-day course called Life Work Mastery. This is going to dive very deeply into the first sphere of the genius sequence, which is your life's work. So, if you are new to Gene Keys, or if you've been doing this work for a long time and you want to go deeper, you really want to learn how to implement this in your life, go ahead and click the link in my bio to sign up for Life Work Mastery, and I will see you in the next video.